The autumn rain drummed against the windows of the old Victorian house on Maple Street, creating a steady rhythm that had become the soundtrack to William's sleepless nights. He stood in the kitchen, coffee mug trembling slightly in his weathered hands, watching the droplets race down the glass. At 72, William had seen enough storms to know that some brought more than just water and wind. Kate sat at the breakfast table behind him, her dark hair falling across her face as she stared at the unopened letter that had arrived 3 days ago. The return address bore the name of a law firm she had never heard of, located in a city 2 states away. Something about it made her stomach clench with an unexplainable dread. "You should open it," William said softly, not turning around. His reflection in the window showed the deep lines etched by decades of hard work and worry. Waiting won't change what's inside. Kate's fingers traced the edges of the envelope. The paper felt expensive, official, the kind that carried news, that changed lives forever. She had been adopted as an infant, raised by loving parents who had passed away 5 years earlier. The questions about her biological family had always lingered in the back of her mind like shadows. But she had never actively sought answers. "What if I don't want to know?" she whispered. William finally turned, his blue eyes gentle but determined. He had been Kate's neighbor for 15 years, ever since she had moved to Maple Street fresh out of college. Over the years, he had become more than a neighbor. He was the grandfather she had never had, the steady presence who helped her through her parents' deaths and her difficult divorce. "Sometimes the things we don't want to know are the things we need to know most," he said, settling into the chair across from her. His arthritic fingers drummed against the wooden table. "I learned that the hard way." Kate looked up at him, seeing something in his expression she had never noticed before. There was a weight there, a burden he carried that went deeper than his usual quiet melancholy. William had always been private about his past, mentioning only that he had been married once, long ago, and that it hadn't worked out. "What do you mean?" she asked. William was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the framed photograph on the kitchen counter. It showed Kate at her college graduation, beaming as she held her diploma. He had been so proud that day, prouder than he had any right to be of someone else's child. "There are things in my past I should have faced decades ago," he said finally. "Choices I made that affected more than just myself. I thought keeping secrets would protect people. But sometimes secrets are just another kind of lie." Kate felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. She picked up the letter again, noting how William's eyes followed her movement. There was something almost desperate in his expression, as if her decision to open or not open this letter would determine his fate as well as hers. The wind picked up outside, rattling the old windows in their frames. The house itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for whatever revelation lay inside that envelope. Kate had always loved this old house, with its creaky floors and vintage wallpaper. William had bought it in 1973, he had told her once, right after he had moved to town for a fresh start. "William," she said slowly, "why are you so nervous about this letter?" His coffee mug clinked against the table as he set it down too hard. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen like a gunshot. When he looked at her, Kate saw fear in his eyes, raw, undisguised fear that made her heart race. "Because," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I have a feeling it's going to change everything between us." Kate's hands began to shake. The letter suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She thought about all the conversations they had shared over the years, all the times William had seemed to know exactly what to say to comfort her, the way he had held her when she cried after her parents' funeral, the gentle strength in his arms that had felt so familiar, so right. "Tell me," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Before I open this, tell me what you're afraid I'm going to find." William stood up abruptly, walking to the window again. His shoulders were rigid with tension, and Kate could see his reflection shaking his head. "I can't," he said. "It's not my story to tell anymore. It stopped being my story the day I walked away." Walked away from what? The question hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Kate could hear the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, counting down the seconds until her world would inevitably shift on its axis. William's reflection met her eyes in the glass. "From the biggest mistake of my life," he said. "From the family I thought I wasn't good enough for. From a love I was too young and too stupid to fight for." Kate's breath caught in her throat. The letter in her hand suddenly felt burning hot. She looked at William's bent shoulders, at the way his fingers pressed against the glass as if he could push through it and escape into the rain. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Known what?" "Don't." The word came out sharper than she intended. "Don't make me say it. Don't make me open this letter to confirm what you already know." William was quiet for so long that Kate wondered if he had heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with unshed tears. "I suspected for years," he admitted, "but I told myself it was impossible, that the universe couldn't be that cruel or that kind, that it was just wishful thinking." From a lonely old man who had grown too attached to his neighbor, Kate stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. The letter crumpled slightly in her grip as she walked toward him. When she placed her free hand on his shoulder, he flinched as if she had burned him. "Turn around," she said softly. "Kate, turn around and look at me." Slowly, William turned. The tears in his eyes made them look like clear blue lakes in the morning sun. Kate saw herself reflected in them, saw the truth that had been hiding in plain sight for 15 years. "Are you my father?" she whispered. The words hung between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they were brave enough to cross. William's knees gave out and he sank into the nearest chair like a man who had been holding his breath for decades, and finally allowed himself to exhale. The simple question Kate had asked seemed to echo through the kitchen, bouncing off the walls and settling into every corner of the old house. "Yes," he whispered, the word so quiet it was almost lost in the sound of rain against the windows. "I believe you are." Kate felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The letter fell from her numb fingers, fluttering to the floor like a wounded bird. She gripped the back of the chair to steady herself, her mind racing through 15 years of memories, searching for signs she had missed, clues that should have told her the truth. "The way you knew I took my coffee," she said, her voice hollow. "Black with 2 sugars, just like my adoptive mother told me my birth father preferred. The way you always remembered the exact date I moved to this neighborhood. How you were always there right when I needed someone most." William nodded, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "I had been watching this house for sale for months before you moved in. When I saw you at the open house that first day, I knew. You have your mother's eyes, but my stubborn chin. The way you tilt your head when you're thinking, it's exactly like I did at your age. My mother." Kate's voice cracked on the words. "You mean my birth mother? Is she gone?" William said softly. "Cancer took her 8 years ago. I found out too late to say goodbye. Too late to tell her I was sorry for everything I put her through." Kate lowered herself into the chair across from him, her legs no longer able to support her weight. The kitchen that had been her sanctuary for so many years suddenly felt foreign, like she was seeing it through different eyes. "Tell me about her," she said. "Tell me about us. Tell me why you left." William reached across the table, his fingers hovering inches from hers before pulling back. Even now, knowing the truth, he seemed afraid to touch her, as if contact might shatter the fragile moment between them. "Her name was Sarah," he began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "Sarah Michelle Connor. She was 19 when we met, working at the diner downtown to pay for nursing school. I was 21, fresh out of the military, thinking I knew everything about life." Kate closed her eyes, trying to picture the woman who had given birth to her. "What was she like?" "Beautiful," William said without hesitation. "Not just on the outside, though she was that too. She had this light inside her, this way of making everyone around her feel special. She wanted to save the world, one patient at a time. She would have been an amazing nurse. But she gave up school when she got pregnant with me." William's face crumpled with guilt. That was my fault. I was working construction then, barely making enough to support myself, let alone a family. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I thought about my own father, how he had walked out on us when I was 12, how my mother had struggled to raise 4 kids alone. So you decided to repeat the pattern, Kate said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. No, William said firmly. At least I told myself that wasn't what I was doing. I convinced myself that Sarah and the baby, you, would be better off without me. I was young and scared and stupid, but I thought I was being noble. I thought walking away was the brave thing to do. Kate picked up the letter from the floor, smoothing out the wrinkles she had created. And now? Do you still think it was brave? Now I know it was the most cowardly thing I've ever done, William admitted. Every day for 35 years, I've regretted that decision. I've wondered what kind of person you grew up to be. What? Your first words were, what made you laugh? What made you cry? I moved to this neighborhood because I found out through mutual friends that your adoptive parents lived here. I hoped maybe someday I'd catch a glimpse of you. And then I moved in next door. And then you moved in next door, he repeated, wonder creeping into his voice. It felt like a miracle and a punishment all at once. Getting to know you, watching you build your life, being there for the good times and the bad. It was everything I had dreamed of and everything I knew I didn't deserve. Kate studied his face, seeing herself in the shape of his nose, the determined set of his jaw. Why didn't you tell me? In 15 years, why didn't you ever say anything? William was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the wooden table. Because I was afraid, he said finally. Afraid you'd hate me for leaving. Afraid you'd think I only came back into your life because I wanted something from you. Afraid that telling you the truth would destroy the relationship we had built. And now I'm more afraid of what that letter might say, he admitted, nodding toward the envelope in her hands. Because if it's what I think it is, if it's from Sarah's family, then keeping this secret isn't just my choice anymore. Kate looked down at the return address again. Connor and Associates legal firm. Her birth name had been Kate Connor before. The adoption. The connection was too obvious to ignore. You think they're looking for me? Sarah's sister Jennifer was a lawyer, William said. She never married, never took another name. When Sarah died, Jennifer was the one who handled her estate. I think she might have left something for you, something that required you to be found. What kind of something? I don't know, William said. But Sarah was always the type to plan ahead, to think about the future. Even when we were together, she used to talk about what kind of world she wanted to leave behind. Kate's hands trembled as she turned the envelope over. The seal was still intact, waiting for her decision. I need to know, she said. But I'm scared. I'm scared too, William admitted. Scared that once you know everything, you won't want me in your life anymore. Scared that learning about your birth family will make you realize how much I took from you by leaving. You didn't just take, Kate said softly, looking up at him. You gave me something too, even if you didn't mean to. You gave me 15 years of having a father figure who cared about me, who showed up, who was there when I needed someone. Maybe it wasn't the way it should have been, but it was something. William's breath hitched. You don't hate me? I'm hurt, Kate said honestly. I'm confused and angry and sad about all the time we lost, but hate you? No, I could never hate the man who taught me how to change a tire, who brought me soup when I was sick, who held me while I cried when David left. Your divorce? William said, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's why you were so devastated. It wasn't just about losing David. It was about being abandoned again. Kate nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I couldn't understand why it hurt so much. I mean, I loved David, but the pain felt bigger than just a broken marriage. It felt like losing everything. Because somewhere inside, you knew. William said. You knew what it felt like to be left behind, even if you couldn't remember it consciously. The rain outside had softened to a gentle patter, and the afternoon light filtering through the clouds cast long shadows across the kitchen floor. Kate looked at the letter again, then at William, seeing both the stranger he had suddenly become and the familiar figure who had been her anchor for so many years. "Will you stay?" she asked. "While I read it?" "Whatever it says, will you stay? This time?" William reached across the table and finally took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "I'll stay as long as you'll have me," he promised. "I should have said that 35 years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'll stay." Kate nodded and carefully slid her finger under the envelope seal, ready to discover what other secrets the past had been keeping from her. The letter unfolded with a soft whisper, revealing elegant letterhead and precise legal language that made Kate's heart race. She read the first few lines silently, her eyes widening with each word, before looking up at William with an expression of complete bewilderment. "They want to meet me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My Aunt Jennifer. She says she's been looking for me for 3 years, ever since my birth mother died. She hired a private investigator to track down the adoption records." William squeezed her hand gently. "What else does it say?" Kate's eyes returned to the letter, scanning the formal language. "There's an inheritance. My mother left me something significant, not just money, but property. A house in Oregon where she lived after you left. Jennifer says there are also personal items, photographs, letters that my mother wrote to me over the years, but never sent." "Letters?" William's voice caught. "She wrote to me," Kate continued, her voice growing stronger as the shock began to wear off. "Every year on my birthday, every Christmas when I graduated high school, when I would have graduated college. Jennifer kept them all. She says there are dozens of them." William closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the image of Sarah sitting alone, writing letters to the daughter she had given up, pouring her heart onto paper that might never be read. "That sounds like something she would do." Kate read further, her expression shifting from wonder to concern. "There's more. Jennifer wants to meet me as soon as possible because—" She paused, her throat tightening around the words. "Because she's sick. Terminal cancer, like her sister. She wants to meet me and give me everything that belonged to my mother before it's too late." The kitchen fell silent except for the gentle drumming of rain and the steady tick of the grandfather clock. William opened his eyes to find Kate staring at him, searching his face for guidance. "You have to go," he said quietly. "Do I?" Kate asked. "I mean, do I really? I have a life here. I have my job at the library, my friends, my routine. I have you. Why should I uproot everything for people I've never met?" "Because they're your family," William said simply. "Your blood family. And because your mother spent 35 years hoping you'd have the chance to know where you came from." Kate set the letter down and walked to the window, watching the rain create rivulets down the glass. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "What if they don't like me? What if I don't live up to whatever image they have of me? What if I go there and realize that being adopted was actually the best thing that could have happened to me?" "Then you'll know," William said, rising from his chair to stand beside her. "And knowing is always better than wondering." "Is it?" Kate turned to face him. "Because I've been wondering about my birth parents my entire life, and now that I know the truth about you, I'm not sure I'm happier. I'm not sure any of this is making my life better." William flinched, as if she had slapped him. "Kate, no. I don't mean it like that," she said quickly, reaching for his arm. "I mean that some truths are complicated. Some answers create more questions than they solve. What if meeting Jennifer and learning about my mother just makes me sadder? What if it makes me angry at choices I can't change?" William was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. Outside, the rain was beginning to taper off and patches of pale sunlight were breaking through the clouds. "When I came back from Vietnam," he said finally, "I was carrying a lot of anger. Anger at the war, at the government, at God, at myself. I met your mother during the worst period of my life, when I was drinking too much and fighting too much, and convinced that the world was fundamentally broken." Kate watched his profile as he spoke, seeing the weight of old memories in his expression. Sarah saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, he continued. She believed I could be better than I was. For a while, when we were together, I almost believed it too. But when she told me she was pregnant, all that old fear came rushing back. I convinced myself that I would ruin her life, that I would ruin your life just by being in it. But you didn't, Kate said. Look at the man you became. Look at how you've lived your life here, how you've helped me and probably dozens of other people over the years. I became that man because of losing you, William said, his voice thick with emotion. Because of the regret I carried every single day. I promised myself that I would try to be worthy of the family I had thrown away, even if I never got the chance to have them back. Kate felt tears starting again. But these were different from the tears of shock and confusion she had shed earlier. These tears came from a deep well of compassion, both for the young man William had been and for the woman Sarah had been, trying to make impossible choices in an unforgiving world. Tell me more about her, Kate said. Tell me what she was like when you were together. William smiled for the first time since the letter had arrived, a real smile that transformed his entire face. She had the worst singing voice I've ever heard, but she sang constantly anyway. In the car, in the shower, while she was cooking. She would sing to the radio even when she didn't know the words, just making up sounds that she thought fit the melody. Kate laughed despite her tears. I do that. David used to tease me about it all the time. She was stubborn too. Once she made up her mind about something, there was no changing it. And she was always cold even in the middle of summer. She would wear sweaters in July and steal my jacket every time we went anywhere. I'm always cold too, Kate said, wrapping her arms around herself. My friends think I'm crazy, but I keep a sweater in my office year-round. She wanted to travel, William continued, his voice growing distant with memory. She had this old atlas that she bought at a garage sale, and she would spend hours looking at it, planning trips to places she wanted to see. Ireland, because her grandmother had been Irish. Japan, because she loved cherry blossoms. Alaska, because she wanted to see the northern lights. Did she ever get to travel? William's smile faded. I don't know. That's one of the things I'll never forgive myself for. Not knowing how her life turned out, whether her dreams came true. Kate picked up the letter again, reading through it more carefully this time. Jennifer mentions that Sarah became a nurse eventually. She says she worked in pediatric oncology, that she specialized in helping children with cancer. She always wanted to help kids, William said softly. She would have been amazing at that. And she never married? Kate continued reading. Jennifer says she had relationships over the years, but nothing that lasted. She says Sarah always claimed she was too busy with her career and her volunteer work, but Jennifer suspected there was more to it. William turned away from the window, unable to meet Kate's eyes. Maybe she was just being practical. Single parenthood is hard enough without... She never got over you, Kate interrupted gently. That's what you're thinking, isn't it? That maybe she never found anyone else, because she was still carrying feelings for the man who left her pregnant, and alone. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication and regret. William sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 72 years. I hope that's not true, he said quietly. I hope she found happiness. I hope she found someone who loved her the way she deserved to be loved. Kate folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into its envelope. There's only one way to find out, she said. I have to go to Oregon. I have to meet Jennifer and read those letters and see the house where my mother lived. And I have to let you go, William said, the words clearly painful for him to speak. Who says you have to let me go anywhere? Kate asked, surprising them, both with the question. Who says you can't come with me? William looked up at her, hope and fear warring in his expression. Kate, I don't think that's a good idea. This is your family, your journey. I don't belong there. Maybe not, Kate agreed. But you belong with me. And right now, I can't imagine facing this without the man who's been my family for the past 15 years, even when neither of us knew that's what he was. The afternoon sun had finally broken free of the clouds, streaming through the kitchen windows and casting everything in golden light. Kate extended her hand to William, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. "Are you sure?" he asked. Kate thought of Sarah, writing letters to a daughter she would never meet, keeping hope alive in the face of impossible circumstances. She thought of Jennifer, sick and dying, determined to fulfill her sister's last wishes. She thought of William, carrying the weight of his choices for 35 years, never knowing if he would get the chance to make amends. "I'm sure," she said. "We're going to Oregon together. We're going to meet my aunt, read my mother's letters, and figure out how to be a family even if we're starting 35 years later than we should have." William's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they seemed to be tears of gratitude rather than grief. "When do we leave?" Kate looked at the letter one more time, noting the phone number at the bottom and the urgent tone of Jennifer's request for contact. "Tomorrow," she said. "We leave tomorrow." The drive to Oregon stretched endlessly before them, 2 days of winding highways and uncertain conversation. Kate gripped the steering wheel of her Honda Civic, her knuckles white with tension, while William sat quietly in the passenger seat, occasionally offering directions or pointing out landmarks along the way. They had barely spoken during the first few hours, both lost in their own thoughts about what awaited them at the end of their journey. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it carried the weight of 35 years of unspoken words and unasked questions. "Tell me about the day I was born," Kate said suddenly, breaking the quiet as they crossed into Ohio. "Were you there?" William shifted in his seat, his weathered hands folding and unfolding in his lap. "No," he said quietly. "I had already left by then. I found out from a mutual friend that you had been born healthy, that you were a girl, that Sarah had named you Catherine Sarah Connor before—" He paused, swallowing hard. "Before she gave you up for adoption." "She named me Catherine," Kate repeated, tasting the formal version of her name. "I never knew that. My adoptive parents always called me Kate, and I just assumed that's what was on my birth certificate." "Catherine was Sarah's grandmother's name," William explained. "She used to tell me stories about her, about how strong and independent she was. She was one of the first women in her town to own her own business back in the 1940s. Kate smiled despite the sadness that seemed to permeate everything about this trip. "So I was named after a strong woman. That's something, at least." They stopped for lunch at a small diner in Indiana, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and pie cases that reminded Kate of the diners from old movies. As they sat across from each other in a red vinyl booth, Kate found herself studying William's face, looking for similarities she had never noticed before. "You know," she said, cutting into her grilled cheese sandwich. "People used to comment on how we looked alike. Neighbors, people at the grocery store. They would say things like, 'Oh, she definitely gets that stubborn streak from you,' or 'You two have the same eyes.' I always thought it was funny how people would see family resemblances where none existed, except they did exist," William said softly. "We just didn't know it." "Did you know?" Kate asked. "Deep down, did some part of you suspect?" William was quiet for a long moment, stirring sugar into his coffee with deliberate slowness. "I wanted to believe it," he admitted. "Every time someone made a comment like that, every time you did something that reminded me of Sarah or of myself at your age, I would let myself hope for just a moment, but then I would remember the odds, the impossibility of it, and I would convince myself I was just being a sentimental old man." "What about when I got divorced?" Kate pressed. "You showed up at my door that night with ice cream and tissues, like you somehow knew I was falling apart. How did you know to come?" "I saw David loading boxes into his car," William said. "I put 2 and 2 together. But Kate, the reason I came over wasn't just because I was being a good neighbor. It was because seeing you hurt made me hurt in a way that didn't make sense unless—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Unless you were my father and you couldn't stand to see your daughter in pain," Kate finished for him. "Unless I was a man who had already failed to protect the 2 most important women in his life, and I wasn't going to fail a 3rd time." even if I didn't understand why it mattered so much. Kate reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. You didn't fail me, William. You've been exactly the father I needed, even if neither of us knew that's what you were. They drove the rest of the day in more comfortable silence, taking turns at the wheel and stopping only for gas and bathroom breaks. As evening approached, they found a motel outside of Denver, 2 adjoining rooms with thin walls and questionable decor. Kate lay in her narrow bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the muffled sounds of William moving around in the room next door. Tomorrow they would reach Oregon. Tomorrow she would meet Jennifer Connor, the aunt she had never known existed. Tomorrow she would read letters from a mother who had loved her enough to let her go, but never enough to forget her. Her phone rang at 11:30, startling her out of her restless half-sleep. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, with an Oregon area code. Hello? She answered cautiously. Kate? The voice on the other end was weak but warm, with a slight rasp that spoke of illness and exhaustion. This is Jennifer Connor. I got your message that you were driving out to see me. Jennifer, Kate said, sitting up in bed and suddenly wide awake. Yes, we're about a day away from Portland. How are you feeling? Like hell, to be honest, Jennifer said with a weak laugh. But better now that I know you're coming. I wasn't sure you would, even after you called. I know this must all be overwhelming. It is, Kate admitted. I have so many questions and I don't even know where to start. Start with the easy ones, Jennifer suggested. Ask me about your mother. Ask me about the house you're inheriting. Ask me about anything except why it took me 3 years to find you, because that's a long and complicated story that we'll have plenty of time for when you get here. Kate smiled, already feeling a connection to this woman she had never met. Okay, easy questions. What was my mother's favorite color? Yellow, Jennifer answered without hesitation. She said it was the color of hope and new beginnings. Her entire house is decorated in different shades of yellow and white. She said it helped her remember that every day was a chance to start over. And what did she do for fun? She gardened, Jennifer said, and Kate could hear the smile in her voice. She had the most incredible vegetable garden you've ever seen. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs, flowers everywhere. She used to say that growing things helped her remember that life always finds a way to flourish, even in difficult circumstances. Kate felt tears starting again. She seemed to cry more in the past 2 days than she had in the past 2 years. She sounds wonderful. She was, Jennifer said simply. She was also stubborn and occasionally unreasonable and terrible at managing money. She once spent her entire grocery budget on a rescue dog she found at the animal shelter, then ate nothing but peanut butter sandwiches for 2 weeks rather than ask for help. Kate laughed through her tears. That sounds like something I would do. I know, Jennifer said. Sarah always said she wondered if you had inherited her soft heart and her terrible financial judgment. She used to worry that you were out there, somewhere, giving away your lunch money to kids who forgot theirs. I did do that, Kate said, amazed. In elementary school, I was constantly giving away my lunch or my allowance to kids who needed it. My adoptive parents used to lecture me about it, but I couldn't help myself. Sarah would have been so proud, Jennifer said softly. She always said that if you grew up to be kind, then nothing else mattered. Not grades or career or money or anything else. Just kindness. Kate heard movement in the room next door and realized that William was probably awake, possibly listening to her side of the conversation through the thin walls. Jennifer, she said carefully, I need to tell you something. I'm not coming alone tomorrow. I'm bringing someone with me and it's complicated. Oh? Jennifer's voice was curious but not alarmed. Kate took a deep breath. I'm bringing my father, my biological father, William Matthews. He's been my neighbor for 15 years and we just discovered the truth about our relationship yesterday. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Kate wondered if the call had been dropped. Jennifer, are you there? William Matthews, Jennifer repeated slowly. William Matthews. Oh my God. Sarah's William? You know about him? Know about him? Jennifer's voice rose slightly. Honey, your mother talked about William Matthews for 35 years. She never got over him. She never stopped hoping that someday he would come back and find both of you. Kate's heart clenched. She never stopped loving him? Never, Jennifer confirmed. She dated other people over the years, had a few serious relationships, but none of them ever measured up to her memory of William. She used to say that he was the love of her life and that loving him had ruined her for anyone else. Kate closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the tragedy of it all. Two people who had loved each other, separated by fear and pride and circumstances, each carrying that love alone for decades. She wrote about him, Jennifer continued, in her journals, in some of the letters she wrote to you. She wondered what kind of man he had become, whether he ever thought about her, whether he had found happiness with someone else. She made me promise that if I ever found you, I would try to find him too. And now he's coming with me, Kate said, her voice barely a whisper. Now he's coming with you, Jennifer agreed. Sarah would have said it was fate. She was always a big believer in things happening for a reason, even when the reason wasn't clear at the time. Kate heard a soft knock on the adjoining door between her room and William's. Hold on just a second, she told Jennifer, then got up to unlock the door. William stood in the doorway in his pajamas and robe, his hair disheveled from sleep. His eyes were red-rimmed, and she could tell he had been crying. I heard you talking, he said quietly. Is that? It's Jennifer, Kate confirmed. Would you like to speak with her? William's face went pale. I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't know what I would say. Kate held out the phone to him. Maybe start with hello. William stared at the phone for a long moment, then slowly reached for it with trembling hands. Kate sat down on the edge of her bed, giving him space but staying close enough to offer support if he needed it. Jennifer, he said into the phone, his voice uncertain. This is William. Kate couldn't hear Jennifer's response, but she watched William's face transform as he listened. The fear and uncertainty gave way to something that looked almost like relief. Yes, he said. Yes, I've thought about her every day for 35 years. I've regretted leaving every single day since I walked away. More listening. Then William sank into the chair by the window, his free hand covering his face. She did? He asked, his voice muffled. She really said that? Kate saw his shoulders begin to shake, and she moved to sit on the arm of his chair, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. I want to make it right, William said into the phone. I know I can't change the past, but I want to try to make it right. For Sarah's memory, for Kate, for all of us. He listened for another moment, then looked up at Kate with wonder in his eyes. She wants to meet us both, he said to Kate. She says Sarah left something for me too. Letters she wrote to me over the years but never sent. Kate felt her heart break and heal simultaneously. Even in death, her mother was trying to bring together the people she had loved most. William handed the phone back to Kate, but Jennifer was already saying goodbye. I'll see you both tomorrow, she said. And Kate, bring tissues. We're all going to need them. After Kate hung up, she and William sat in comfortable silence for a while, processing everything they had learned. The revelation that Sarah had never stopped loving William added a new dimension to their story, one that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. She never stopped loving you, Kate said finally. And I never stopped loving her, William replied. I just convinced myself that love wasn't enough, that I would ruin her life if I stayed. Maybe love isn't always enough, Kate said thoughtfully. But maybe it's worth fighting for anyway. Maybe the trying is what matters, not the outcome. William looked at her with pride shining in his eyes. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, Kate said, squeezing his shoulder. A father who showed me how to be strong, even when he didn't know that's what he was doing. They said goodnight and returned to their respective rooms, But Kate lay awake for hours thinking about the woman who had given birth to her, who had loved William Matthews for 35 years, who had written letters to a daughter she had never met. Tomorrow she would finally get to know Sarah Connor, not just as the woman who had brought her into the world, but as a real person with hopes and dreams and a heart full of love that had never found its way home. Tomorrow, she would step into a house painted yellow like hope and new beginnings, and maybe finally, she would understand where she came from and who she was meant to be. The yellow house sat nestled among towering pine trees like something from a fairy tale, its cheerful, paint gleaming in the late afternoon Oregon sunshine. Kate pulled into the circular driveway and turned off the engine, but neither she nor William made any move to get out of the car. They sat in silence, staring at the place that had been Sarah's sanctuary for over 2 decades. "It's beautiful," Kate whispered, taking in the wraparound porch with its white rocking chairs, the flower boxes overflowing with late-season blooms, the carefully tended garden that stretched around the side of the house. "It looks like a home where someone was happy." "It looks like Sarah," William said softly. She always talked about having a house with a big garden and a porch where she could sit and watch the sunset. Before either of them could lose their nerve, the front door opened and a woman appeared on the porch. Jennifer Connor was clearly Sarah's sister. She had the same delicate bone structure, the same warm brown eyes that Kate saw in her own reflection. But where Sarah had been young and vibrant in William's memories, Jennifer looked fragile, her thin frame wrapped in a soft cardigan despite the warm weather. Kate and William climbed out of the car and walked slowly toward the porch. Jennifer came down the steps to meet them, her eyes moving back and forth between Kate and William with a mixture of joy and disbelief. "Kate," she said, her voice trembling as she opened her arms. "Oh, sweetheart, you look just like her." Kate fell into her aunt's embrace, inhaling the scent of lavender and vanilla that seemed to cling to Jennifer's clothes. It was like hugging a stranger and coming home at the same time. When they separated, Jennifer turned to William, studying his face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "And you," she said, shaking her head in amazement. "You're exactly how Sarah described you. Older, obviously, but those eyes are the same. She used to say you had the kindest eyes she'd ever seen." William shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. "Jennifer, I want you to know how sorry I am. For leaving, for not being there when Sarah needed me, for all the pain I caused." Jennifer reached out and took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so frail. "William, Sarah never blamed you, not once in 35 years. She understood why you left even if she wished you hadn't." "But I abandoned her," William protested. "I left her pregnant and alone." "You left her pregnant and terrified," Jennifer corrected gently. "There's a difference. You were barely more than children yourselves dealing with circumstances that would challenge people twice your age. Sarah never expected you to be perfect." Kate watched this exchange with fascination, seeing how Jennifer's words seemed to lift a weight from William's shoulders that he had been carrying for decades. "Come inside," Jennifer said, linking her arms through both of theirs. "I have so much to show you, so many stories to tell, and frankly, I need to sit down before I fall down." The interior of the house was exactly what Kate had expected based on Jennifer's description. Soft yellows and creamy whites, comfortable furniture arranged to take advantage of the natural light streaming through large windows. Photographs lined the mantelpiece and covered the walls, and Kate found herself drawn to them like a magnet. "That's Sarah at nursing school graduation," Jennifer said, noticing Kate's fascination with a photo of a young woman in a white cap and uniform. She was so proud that day. She had worked 2 jobs to pay for school, and it took her 6 years to finish, but she did it. Kate studied her mother's face in the photograph, seeing her own features reflected back at her. "She looks happy." "She was," Jennifer confirmed. "That was during her happy period, after she had given you up, but before the reality of what that meant really set in. She was convinced she had done the right thing, that you were better off with parents who could give you everything she couldn't." William stood beside Kate, his eyes fixed on the same photograph. "She was always so determined, Once she set her mind on something, nothing could stop her. "Nothing except you," Jennifer said quietly. "You were the only thing that could ever knock her off course." She led them to a cozy sitting room where cardboard boxes were stacked on every available surface. "These are Sarah's personal things," she explained. "I've been going through them slowly, but there's so much. She kept everything. Every card, every letter, every ticket stub from movies she went to. She said you never knew what might become precious later." Jennifer opened the nearest box and pulled out a manila envelope thick with papers. "These are the letters she wrote to you, Kate. 35 years worth. I thought you might want to start with the first one." Kate accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Her name was written on the front in careful script. "For Catherine Sarah, my beautiful daughter." The date showed it had been written just 1 week after her birth. "Should I read it now?" Kate asked, suddenly uncertain. "That's up to you," Jennifer said. "But I think Sarah would want you to know that she wrote it sitting in that rocking chair by the window, the same chair she sat in every year on your birthday to write you a new letter." Kate settled into the mentioned rocking chair and carefully opened the first letter. William sat on the sofa nearby, and Jennifer perched on the edge of her chair, all of them holding their breath as Kate began to read silently. After a few moments, Kate looked up with tears streaming down her face. "She writes about holding me for 2 hours after I was born. She says she memorized every detail of my face, every tiny finger and toe, because she knew it would have to last her a lifetime." Kate's voice broke and William moved to kneel beside her chair, offering his silent support. "She writes about naming me Catherine after her grandmother, but also after Saint Catherine, the patron saint of learning. She wanted me to be smart and curious and brave." Kate wiped her eyes and continued reading. "She says she hopes someday I'll understand why she made the choice she did, that it wasn't because she didn't love me but because she loved me too much to give me less than the best life possible." Jennifer reached into another box and pulled out a photograph album. "There are pictures, too. She would drive by the park where she thought you might play, hoping to catch a glimpse of you. She never did, but she took pictures of other children and imagined you among them." Kate set the letter aside and accepted the photo album, flipping through pages of playground scenes, children at birthday parties, little girls in school uniforms. It was heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time, a mother's desperate attempt to be part of her child's life from a distance. "What about William?" Kate asked suddenly. "You said she left letters for him too?" Jennifer nodded and reached for another box. 2 boxes full. Letters she wrote when she was angry, letters she wrote when she was sad, letters she wrote on anniversaries and holidays, letters she wrote when she saw a father playing with his daughter and wondered if you had found a good dad in your adoptive family. She handed William a letter from the top of the pile. This one was written on what would have been your first wedding anniversary. William's hands shook as he opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. He read silently for several minutes, his expression cycling through pain, regret, and something that might have been relief. "She forgives me," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "She says she understands why I left, that she might have done the same thing in my position. She says she hopes I found happiness and peace, and that she wants me to know I gave her the greatest gift of her life. Our daughter." The 3 of them sat in the yellow living room as the afternoon sun began to slant through the windows, each lost in their own thoughts about the woman who had brought them together even in death. Kate could feel Sarah's presence in every carefully chosen photograph, every lovingly preserved memento, every word of the letters that had never been sent. "There's something else," Jennifer said eventually. "Something Sarah left specifically for both of you." She stood and walked to the mantelpiece, retrieving a sealed envelope that was larger than the others. "She wrote this during her final week. In the hospital, she made me promise to give it to you only if you ever found each other." Kate and William looked at each other, then at the envelope in Jennifer's hands. Somehow, this final letter felt more significant than all the others combined. "She knew," Kate said with certainty. "Somehow she knew we would find each other. Sarah always believed in signs and fate and happy endings. Jennifer said, handing them the letter. Even when her own story didn't get the ending she wanted, she believed yours would be different. William took the envelope and carefully opened it, unfolding a single sheet of paper covered in Sarah's handwriting. He began to read aloud, his voice steady, despite the tears in his eyes. My dearest William, and my beloved Catherine, if you are reading this together, then miracles do still happen, and love really does find a way. I have spent 35 years hoping for this moment, dreaming of the day when my two favorite people would discover each other and realize that family isn't always about blood or timing or perfect circumstances. Sometimes family is about second chances and forgiveness and the courage to start over no matter how much time has passed. Kate reached for William's free hand, and he continued reading through his tears. I never stopped loving either of you, not for a single day, and now that you've found each other, I hope you'll help each other heal from all the years we lost. Kate, your father is a good man who made a scared young man's mistake. William, your daughter is everything I dreamed she would be. Kind and strong and full of the love that we created together. Take care of each other and know that wherever I am finally at peace. 6 months later, Kate stood in the kitchen of the yellow house in Oregon, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The melody was one she had made up herself, just random notes that seemed to fit together, the kind of wordless song that drove her friends crazy but felt perfectly natural to her. She was wearing one of William's old cardigans over her summer dress despite the warm evening air. The house had become home faster than she had ever imagined possible. After spending 2 weeks in Oregon settling Jennifer's affairs and going through Sarah's belongings, Kate had made the decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She had decided to stay. The library in Portland had an opening. The house needed someone to love it, and for the first time in her life, Kate felt like she was exactly where she belonged. William had returned to their old neighborhood long enough to put his house on the market and pack up 30 years of carefully accumulated possessions. The transition had been easier than either of them expected, partly because they were finally being honest about what they meant to each other, and partly because the yellow house seemed to welcome them both with open arms. Something smells incredible, William said, coming into the kitchen from the garden where he had been working since early morning. His hands were dirty with soil, and there were grass stains on his knees, but he looked more content than Kate had ever seen him. It's Sarah's recipe, Kate said, stirring the pot on the stove. Jennifer left me her cookbook and I've been working my way through it. This is her famous vegetable soup, made with tomatoes and herbs from her own garden. Our garden now, William corrected gently. Our garden, Kate agreed, smiling at how natural the word sounded. William washed his hands at the sink and peered over Kate's shoulder at the simmering soup. It smells exactly like something she would have made. She was always trying to get me to eat more vegetables. Well, some things never change, Kate teased. I noticed you picked around the carrots in last night's stir-fry. I was saving them for last, William protested, but he was grinning. The past 6 months had been filled with moments like this: easy conversation, shared meals, the comfortable rhythm of two people learning to be a family. They had read through all of Sarah's letters together, sometimes laughing at her observations about daily life, sometimes crying at her expressions of love and longing. They had sorted through her photographs, her books, her collection of vintage teacups that Jennifer had insisted Kate should keep. Most importantly, they had talked. Really talked, for the first time in 35 years. About the past, about their regrets, about the future they wanted to build together. William had shared stories about his time in Vietnam, about the depression and anger that had driven him to make such a devastating choice. Kate had talked about her childhood, her adoptive parents, the sense of incompleteness that had followed her through life until she finally understood its source. I have news, Kate said, turning to face him with an expression that was equal parts nervous and excited. Good news or bad news? William asked, though her smile suggested he didn't need to worry. Jennifer called this afternoon, Kate said. She's been accepted into that experimental treatment program at Johns Hopkins. Her doctor thinks she has a real chance of beating this thing. William's face lit up with genuine joy. Over the past months, he and Jennifer had developed a close friendship, built on their shared love of Sarah and Kate. Jennifer had become the sister-in-law he had never known he wanted, and her illness had been a constant source of worry for both of them. "That's wonderful," he said, pulling Kate into a hug. "When does she start?" "Next month, and she asked if we would consider moving to Baltimore while she's in treatment. She wants family nearby and—" Kate paused, suddenly shy. "I think I'd like to be there for her. She's the only connection I have left to my mother's family." "Then we'll go," William said without hesitation. "Baltimore, Baltimore County, wherever she needs us to be." Kate pulled back to look at him in surprise. "Just like that? You don't want to think about it, discuss the logistics, worry about money or jobs or any of the practical considerations?" "Kate," William said, his hands framing her face gently. "I spent 35 years thinking and discussing and worrying about practical considerations. I missed your entire childhood because I was too afraid to take a chance on something that mattered. I'm not making that mistake again." "But your garden," Kate protested. "You've worked so hard to get it established." "Here. Gardens can be replanted," William said simply. "Family can't be replaced." Kate felt the familiar sting of tears, but these were happy tears, the kind that came from being overwhelmed by love and gratitude. "How did I get so lucky?" she asked. "How did I end up with a father who's willing to uproot his entire life just to support someone he's known for 6 months?" "You didn't get lucky," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "We both got a second chance. Sarah gave us a second chance to be the family we should have been all along." The timer on the stove chimed, and Kate reluctantly pulled away to check on the soup. As she stirred the pot, she thought about Jennifer's phone call earlier that day, about the hope in her aunt's voice when she talked about the treatment program, about the way she had cried when Kate offered to come with her. "There's something else," Kate said, not looking at William. "Jennifer asked me something and I said yes, but I probably should have talked to you first." "What did you ask her?" "Actually, she asked me," Kate said, still stirring unnecessarily. "She asked if, after she's better, she could come live with us. She said she's tired of being alone, tired of rattling around in that big house by herself. She wants to be part of a family again." William was quiet for so long that Kate finally turned to look at him, worried that she had overstepped somehow. "You said yes," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I said yes," Kate confirmed. "But if you're not comfortable with it—" "Kate," William interrupted, "Jennifer is Sarah's sister. She's your aunt. She's the woman who kept your mother's memory alive for 35 years and made it possible for us to find each other. Of course she should live with us." Kate set down the spoon and turned to face him fully. "So we're really doing this? We're becoming a family of 3? "We're becoming whatever kind of family we need to be," William said. "Whether that's 3 people or 4 or however many people need a place to belong." Kate thought about her mother's letters, about Sarah's conviction that love always found a way, about the woman who had spent her life helping children fight cancer because she couldn't help the child she had given away. She thought about the yellow house that had welcomed them so completely, about the garden where William spent his mornings and she spent her evenings, about the rocking chair where she had learned to love a mother she had never met. "She would be proud of us," Kate said softly. "Sarah, she would be proud of how we figured this out." "She would be proud of you," William corrected, "for having the courage to open that letter, for being willing to forgive an old man's mistakes, for creating something beautiful out of something that was broken." The soup was ready, and Kate ladled it into bowls while William set the table. They ate dinner as the sun set over the Oregon hills, planning their move to Baltimore, talking about Jennifer's treatment, discussing the logistics of building a life around love instead of fear. After dinner, they sat on the front porch in Sarah's rocking chairs, watching the stars emerge in the clear mountain sky. Kate had brought her mother's photo album outside, and they looked through it together as they had done countless evenings since moving to the yellow house. "Look at this one," Kate said, pointing to a photograph of a little girl on a swing. Sarah wrote on the back that she took this at a park in Portland, imagining it was me having fun on a Saturday afternoon. William studied the photo, then looked at Kate with a smile. "You know what I think we should do?" "What?" "I think we should take pictures of our own. Real pictures of our real life together. I think we should create the photo album Sarah always wanted to have but never could." Kate felt her heart swell with love for this man who had learned, finally, to stop running from the good things in his life. "That sounds perfect," she said. "We'll start tomorrow." "We'll start now," William said, pulling out his phone and holding it up to capture both of them sitting in Sarah's chairs, surrounded by Sarah's flowers. Living in Sarah's house, finally living the life she had dreamed for them. As the camera clicked, Kate felt something settle into place inside her chest, something that had been restless and searching for 35 years. She was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the family she was meant to have. However late, they had all found each other. In the distance, a night bird called out and Kate found herself humming again, making up a melody that sounded like contentment, like home, like the end of a very long journey and the beginning of something entirely new. William reached over and took her hand, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over their shared sky, knowing that tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, and new opportunities to be the family they had always been meant to be. Sarah's yellow house settled around them like a blessing, and for the first time in their lives, both Kate and William felt completely, perfectly at peace.